I love to see the towns passing by and to ride these rails neath God's blue sky. Let me travel this land from the mountains to the sea, 'cause that's the life I believe He meant for me. And when I'm gone and at my grave you stand, say God called home your rambling man.
Welcome to Ramblin' Man Podcast, episode number 56. This one's with Brian Strutz, and it's on the science of pizza. And trust me, we eventually get there. We talk a lot about movies on the front end, but we do eventually get into the science of the dough and how he makes pizzas, and it's a great talk. If you'd like to learn more about Brian and what he does, you can visit his restaurant's website at adobopizza.com, ADOPOPIZZA.com. Be sure to give them a follow on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. Great chat. Our sponsor this week is the Central Collective. Central Collective is a mixed-use creative space for entrepreneurship, events, and engagement with Knoxville's creative community. They host monthly events such as Good Sport Night, First Friday art shows, pop-up dinners, workshops, yoga classes, pretty much anything else we or the people in the community can dream up. If you'd like to learn more about the Central Collective, visit them online at thecentralcollective.com. Be sure to look at their event calendar and see what they have coming up next. Without much further ado, here's the episode.
What?
No, it's just the awkwardness of the intros because it just goes whatever.
Well, just own it, man. Let's do it. Own it.
So Game of Thrones, no.
I should admit, I don't watch Game of Thrones. I stopped after the third season because I had too much going on. I was losing interest. I'm sorry. Please don't hate me.
Ramble Man fans, please don't hate. I've never seen one episode.
Oh, wow. So are we like commiserating on this right now?
No, I think it's the minute it started, I didn't have access to HBO, and it got about halfway through the season, and I would hear people talking about it. I was like, I'm going to wait till it's all over and then just watch it in one big whack.
You're just one big contrarian, aren't you?
Yeah, and that's like Watchmen is on right now, and I really want to watch it, but there's only like 2 episodes left. I was like, at this point, I'm just going to try and avoid spoilers, knock on wood, and watch it all when it's over.
Yeah, I've heard really good things about Watchmen. I would love to start that show.
And I thought about that, like Westworld, I watched season 1, and it was a lot better watching it in one big whack. Because there's so many storylines and crap going on. I was like, I'm never going to remember any of this. That's the thing with Game of Thrones. It's like, they take a 2-year break. You're expecting me to remember Daenerys Targaryen, that name, after 2 years. I'll have watched many TVs since then.
Wait, so was that our intro?
Yeah.
Take 2.
Yeah, I love it. It's so I think it's because there was like 4 episodes in a row that I recorded right when Game of Thrones was ending. And the people I was recording with, that's all they wanted to talk about was Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
That's okay, I'm good. I can't even think. Yeah, with you working so much, do you even get to keep up with TVs or movies or anything now?
Yeah, sometimes when we get back really late at night, it's, you start an episode at 11:45 and you're just spent. Maybe I'll make it through 20, 30 minutes of it if I'm lucky. So it just depends on when I started. If I started like before 10 o'clock, yeah, I could watch an episode or 2, but it's hard to get into a serial show.
So maybe if you started right now, in 6 weeks, you could actually finish The Irishman.
Oh yeah, isn't that 3 hours?
3 hours and 40 minutes.
That's another thing that we've had queued up, and like when we sit down for dinner, I'll suggest it, and our dinner starts at 10 o'clock sometimes, and we both always go, I don't think we can start that tonight.
Here, I'll do a controversial thing. You're good.
Oh no.
It's good. It's as Larry Wilmore put it, it's an hour too long.
Okay.
It's okay. And there's a big
It's a little self-congratulatory.
I don't believe any director should ever or actor should ever get a pass. Like before their movie, like I don't like Quentin Tarantino that much because I feel like everybody's like, oh my God, he's the great. I was like, he stole, because I'm a movie nerd. I'm like, he stole this, and this. I was like, that bugs me. I was like, he needs an editor. I was like,
He's been working with the same editor pretty much his whole career, right?
No,
did she pass away?
Yeah, she passed away, I think, before Django or as Django was coming out.
Oh.
And that's when it kind of started getting...
Shows you the value of a good editor.
Yeah. And I think it's sometimes things are outrageous for outrageous sake. Like when I saw Kill Bill and it panned over and you saw the back of the truck and it said Pussy Wagon. I was like, okay, that's awesome. Jackie Brown's my favorite movie of his.
It's probably the most underrated.
Yeah. Yeah, nobody...
It's very rarely mentioned in the pantheon of top
And I was
films
talking with a friend of my cousin's husband. Got a degree in film.
I think you can call him your cousin.
Okay, cousin. Zach. You may know my cousin Lindsay Collins. So
yes.
She worked for, so her husband, Zach, super nice guy, but he got a degree in film. He's a big film nerd. And I was like, dude, Jackie Brown is a good, like, example of long takes building tension or setting a scene. Then you watch Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it's long takes it's like, okay, that was pointless. Why did we just watch Margot Robbie walk for 4 minutes to go get a book?
Or go into the theater and then it pans down to the turf shoes and back up. And there's some really beautiful shots, but also kind of self-congratulatory.
Yeah.
Like, look what I can do. Yeah. And then the end of that movie was like, and maybe this is polarizing, but there was no release with the tension. It was a very anticlimactic ending. It was fun that it was so different than you'd expect, but
I will say
I didn't like it.
I thought there were a lot, and I rewatched it. Now it's on digital. I was like, I'm going to rewatch this. And also, Dale, after we saw it, said, if you look at it through the prism of it's all one big fuck you to Polanski, you're not man enough to protect your wife. You can hold a little girl on your lap without trying to rape her. Like, all this stuff. I was like, okay, I actually like it. But that's what one critic was like. There's like 10 big touch points. He's like, I think these are all jabs at Polanski. I was like, I respect it a lot more if that's it. I thought it had a lot of good moments. Like when Brad Pitt went to Spawn Ranch, like from beginning to
That was the
his
best.
His tail lights going
Easily
away.
the best scene in the movie in terms of tension.
The guy riding the horse, and it just kept. I was like,
beautiful.
"Holy shit! Like this is what I'm talking about."
That's
like,
drama. That's well-crafted drama.
Yeah.
The movie's not devoid of those moments.
The hardest I've laughed in a long time. I went and saw that with Sean Pointer, our friend Sean.
Yeah.
And I sat next to him. There were two moments. One, I got up to use the bathroom, and I came back, and it was when Leo and the little girl were sitting on the porch. And I sat down, and I left at the beginning of that scene. I came back. They were still talking. I looked at Sean. I was like, hey, man, did I miss anything? He went, not a damn thing. That cracked me up. But then at the end happened, fade to black, and he went, what the fuck was that? And looked at me, and I was just snot coming out of my nose, dying laughing. He was so angry. He was so angry. Because it was like 2 hours and 40 minutes or something like that. And he was so angry. It was so funny. Anyway, yeah. Okay. So we've established that you work, and you work a lot of hours. So
Oh, I didn't know we established that.
I said you work.
You're right. I guess we did get to that by saying
That's my
I don't have
awkward
time to watch.
transition.
Yeah. Sure. We who doesn't work a lot at this point in life? I think at our age,
I spent
You
6
work.
weeks, the more often than not, working 100-hour weeks. So I'm a little fried right now.
Yep. We So what do you want to talk about, man?
So
you want to
we're
talk about
gonna
movies?
We're going
or
to talk about pizza. What did you think of Toy Story 4? No,
I haven't seen it yet.
only because I
work too much.
Toy Story 4 is actually pretty good. I take my little sister. We watch every Pixar film together.
I'm
Since
assuming
she-
you have Disney Plus. Let's just talk about movies and entertainment. What are we doing? Are you on Disney Plus?
Yes, I am on Disney Plus. The Mandalorian's very good. And the episodes are only like 30, and I'm not a Star Wars fan. The episodes are only like 32 minutes long.
Maybe that'll be our Christmas gift to ourselves this year.
Yeah.
Subscription to that, so we can also never watch any of those episodes.
I got in early and got like some Founders Circle deal where I got 3 years for $150.
But it's like it's $6.99 a month.
So I got it for about
$84.
So
you got 3 years for the price of 2 years.
Yeah. And I was like, I'm going to watch all the Marvel shows. Yeah. I was interested in the Mandalorian, and they're going to program a lot more shows and movies. It's like to not have to worry about it for 3 years. It's covered.
Well, that's also a great gift, like price point. You can give someone a year of Disney, and I heard that if you have a Verizon Unlimited plan, you get a free year of it.
Yep. You've got Verizon Unlimited, and I swear I thought I saw, because Disney also owns Hulu, and I swear I think if you have a Hulu subscription, you also get Disney. That's how I did with Hulu. Spotify ran a deal. It was like if you pay for Spotify Premium, we'll give you Hulu for free. So you're essentially paying each one $5 a month. I was like, I can do that.
It's really brilliant when you think about it, and I can't help but be skeptical at how all of these services are so cheap. It's like they've each convinced us that it's an affordable luxury. Like, oh, it's just $5, just $6, just $7. Whereas before, when we were just straight up paying for everything bundled into cable, it was like $150 or whatever. And now we're creeping up to that point where all these services are $5 to $15.
Yep.
And you're like, we're right back where we started, and they won again. They just keep winning. Money always wins.
My friend Dan Taylor, he said this like 3 years ago when that CBS All Access got announced. He's like, I believe we're going to get $7.99 to death. And I was like, holy shit, that is a great turn of phrase.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, we're going to get $7.99 to death. But it's a la carte now, and you can choose what you... I don't get CBS. Yeah. I don't care to get CBS.
Yeah, and if we're being honest with ourselves, or at least when I say we, I mean my wife and I, all we really need to pay for is The Office.
Which I'm trying to remember, is it leaving Netflix?
It is. I think there's another year. And it's going to go on NBC's service, but it also will be on Hulu for a year or two. It's just, who knows. But really, we watch that more than anything else because it's like a warm blanket at night.
Yeah. I've been going back and watching Cheers from the beginning, and I realized it holds up, and it's unbelievable how good it is.
I'll just add that to the list.
Yeah. Okay. So I do have a segue. You talked about quality. So you're not Domino's. You're quality and research. This one is kind of the science of pizza, or the science of dough and pizza making.
Cool. Okay. So all right. So my name's Brian. My pizzeria is called Adobo Pizza. We do sourdough Neapolitan style pizza cooked in a wood burning oven. Jody just referenced that we're not Domino's, which it would be cool if we were. Domino's is a really fantastic company. The pizza is not the worst. They've got a lot of cool things that they've done with technology, and it's easy to hate on the big guy, but I'm going to try not to do that today. Yeah, we pay a lot of attention to quality. Thank you for thinking that. I hope that's true.
Yeah, because I'm trying to think how to say this. It's definitely not cookie cutter. Like you go in there, and I feel like there's a lot of love and care, and I feel like when you put an item on your menu, it's almost like you're curating your menu. You're like, no, we've worked through 50 different things, and this is what we think is the best representation of what we have to offer.
Curating is a good way to put it, and we use that word a lot. It's my opinion and my belief that we all have access to the same information right now, and most people would probably agree with that. The internet is largely at fault. So because we all have the same information, how do we differentiate ourselves? And you do that by curation, your taste, whether it's food or music or movies or, you're a bookstore. It's what you choose to put on the shelf or the menu that sets you apart. And I think it is highly curated. Not every item was tested 50 times like you suggested, but some were.
Yeah.
And will continue to be. And it doesn't need to be big. We also believe that successful restaurants tend to be very focused, or at least in this day and age where overhead keeps creeping up. The $8, you just said would be $7.99 to death. Yeah. There's a lot of that. in the restaurant industry with all the services you can get.
Yeah.
So, that all gets lumped into overhead. And if you're not careful, you'll be losing money before you ever make a pizza. So we tend to keep our menu very focused. And if we're going to add something, we like to take it away. Or some people look at like their closets at home like that, where if you're going to add 2 shirts, you better take away 2 shirts because the world is finite and you really only need so much in it.
Yeah. And I see people, like I was talking to Holly, Holly's Gourmet recently, and I go in there a lot. I hadn't realized that place is a great midway point for business meetings. Also, because they're only open till 3. It's like, this is a great, like, people coming from west, me coming from north, go in there. I did not realize that she had slowly pulled like some of her stalwarts off of her menu until we were talking. She was like, yeah, if you notice, the Ricky Ricardo's not on there. I was like, holy crap, I didn't even notice. She was like, no, it's a turn. And then when I bring it back, it will be special.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. I was like, it's almost like curating or almost like conducting. Like, no, there's thought behind all this. It's not just we're going to Cheesecake Factory it and put a 52-page book together of everything you can get.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of what the opposite of what I'm saying is. Although they're very successful, very profitable, their kitchen is a well-oiled machine, and I have a degree of reverence for that. But reverence and appreciation maybe is a little different. I don't want to go eat at Cheesecake Factory. Yeah. But, was it real? Recognize real?
Yeah, yeah. Game recognize game. Yeah. Oh my God. So I'm trying to, because it's weird because we've already delved into some on why Knox, but I'm like, nah, I probably need to pull back. And so how did you get started in the restaurant industry?
I got started in the restaurant industry at a young age. My first job was a cook in a Greek restaurant, worked in the wood-fired pizza oven, and I cooked at a couple of other places. Throughout college, I was a server. After college, I worked in television, and then I started cooking at Blackberry Farm. After a long trip to Italy with my wife, I got back into food from a professional standpoint. And Blackberry Farm is like a culinary school of sorts for many people, unless you've been to culinary school. I hadn't, and that became mine.
Yeah.
So Blackberry Farm was a turning point for me where I started to see and handle food in a very new level, like a very, very, very high level. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I would clean, a dozen to 2 dozen lobsters, fresh Maine Stonington lobsters. And to be able to do that on such a weekly basis with such an expensive ingredient is like you get to really hone a craft, whether it's making pasta, making bread, cleaning lobsters, breaking down fish, meats. You get to really dive into the genre of that, and you can do that at a place like Blackberry. So whatever, I digress. That was the turning point for me with food. And I said this in our last podcast, we had some deaths in the family, and that made me leave food to do some familial responsibility and in personal finance. And it sounds like a really huge boon to our life, and it really wasn't. It was a very modest thing that was focused around keeping my mom afloat after my dad passed. So I started to understand money really well from that, and that experience and dealing with investments and knowing how to work with debt.
Yeah.
So with that knowledge and then the knowledge of food, we started Adobo with a pretty good background on, or holistic background on like business.
Right.
And so the restaurant opened 2016. We've been open over 3 years. It's done really well from I guess a cultural sense and in a financial sense. It's done well enough to where my wife could leave teaching, and we both now fully operate the restaurant together.
Awesome.
We do a sourdough crust. People often ask, what is that? And I'm assuming you will ask that.
Yeah.
So without further ado.
So your standard, we mentioned, since we've already been ragging on Domino's a little bit, it is interesting because, there's a lot of people like, there is no bad pizza. There is bad pizza. Good God, there is bad pizza. But there are things I think that stand out to me at different places, and I don't want to slag on them now, but I remember, let's say 7 years ago, I used to love Barley's crust because it almost tasted like a pretzel. And I think until you all came around and were like sourdough crust, it had never occurred to me that there would be different types of breading on a crust. As stupid as that sounds, but it was like, no, it's just pizza dough. You know, it's the same thing. It's like, no, it's something completely different. So it's interesting. Like it was, Harvey's was, I get the meat lovers. It's an insane amount of meat on there, and I'm a big hearty boy, and it really hits the spot. But when it came to like Barley's is the best example I can give where it tasted like a pretzel. I was like, I dig that. I was like, the toppings and stuff is okay, but the showcase here is really the crust. So what made you decide to go with a sourdough crust as opposed to a standard crust or something different like that, like a pretzel? I hate to say pretzel crust, but that's what it tasted like to me.
Yeah, well, maybe it was sweeter.
Yeah.
It might have been a malted flour. There's no telling why you were thinking pretzel when you had it. And also, I can't speak specifically to Barley's over the years. It has changed hands a couple of times.
Yeah.
Or maybe just once.
I think 3 times.
Okay. Well, okay, so a dilemma that a lot of restaurants face is your food cost.
Yeah.
Is how do you keep it at a reasonable rate and in up and down seasons as you know the life cycle of a restaurant happens, because everybody has price increases. Every service you're paying for, there's an inflationary aspect to it, and food is not excluded from that. So a lot of restaurants fall into the trappings of saving money on food cost,
right?
And it's a very easy, slippery slope that once you start playing around with some things, whether it's your cheese or your flour or the oil you put in your dough, if you use oil, or your tomatoes and toppings, you kind of get a taste for those savings when you see it. If you're like, oh, wow, I was paying $12 a pound for this, and now I can pay $6 a pound. And then you look at how many pounds you're selling in a week, and you're like, well, we're selling 80 pounds a week, so that's 6 times 80, 400. Is that $480?
Yeah.
You just saved $480 a week. It doesn't really take that much math to extrapolate that out to a year. So it's tempting, and I say that because I know what that looks like, and we've successfully avoided it on things that we think would really impact the dough or the food, the product. And a lot of restaurants, they don't know how to stop themselves from that, and I'm not accusing Barleys of that. I would just guess that over the years, that might have happened.
And the rising food costs, because I know a certain hot chicken place in town where they buy their chicken, I found out through a third party that place kept going up on the cost of chicken, but they would not rise the cost of on their menu. Yeah. They're like, we can't raise the cost, and they're like, and the third party was like, you have to, even if it's 50 cents, you have to absorb that cost somewhere because you're going to screw yourself.
Yeah, you'll go out of business.
Yeah,
and that's the ugly truth of it. Raising prices sometimes is an absolute necessity, and our current presidential administration just imposed a pretty significant tax on European imports, and our entire wine list is Italian, with the exception of one Slovenian wine. The flour we're using is Italian. We have a couple of other, our prosciutto is Italian, our speck is Italian. We have, tens of thousands of dollars annually, if not $100,000 annually, of Italian products that we buy. So right away, there's going to be a $25,000 increase somewhere that somebody's going to have to eat. And I certainly empathize with that business owner that doesn't want to increase prices. We've been pretty good about not doing that. We raised the price of our gelato from $3.50 to $4 a cup.
Yeah, worth it.
Big commodity ingredients like milk or chicken, like you were talking about, butter, those things get traded on markets. They're commodity markets. Like the prices, there's a fluctuation to it.
Yeah,
that has a real effect on the bottom line that you have to pay attention to if you're a restaurant that's dealing with a lot of commodities. And in our sense, in our restaurant, we don't have a ton of commodity products. with the exception of like flour is obviously a commodity,
Right.
wheat is a commodity, tomatoes are, cheese is. But when you're buying artisanal products, you're paying a little bit more than other people would be. So you're almost protecting yourself from some of the swings in price. It doesn't happen quite as much, or at
Okay.
least that's what I've seen. Like they're building some of those things into their price. And if you're buying the cheapest thing possible, you're probably going to experience fluctuations more than most.
Okay.
I'm not really sure how we get out of this little hole I dug.
I thought of something. Whereas on the flip side, I think a lot of other industries are experiencing I'm gonna call it the Walmartification. Like these microphones cost me $20 on Amazon, whereas I feel like 10 years ago these mics probably cost $65, and I would have had to go to Guitar Center or Rick's Music. I'm gonna do Rick's Music and do a local shop as opposed to a chain. I think it's interesting because I feel like I keep seeing food costs going up, which is a necessity for people to live, whereas like a lot of ancillary stuff, it just keeps dropping and dropping and dropping towards like, I'm not going to pay $25 for those mics. $20 is the most I'll spend. Does that make sense? Like I bought a thing of peanut butter and it was like $7.50. I was like, that seems like a lot for peanut butter.
Yeah.
A lot of me is thinking like, what about the family with 3 kids that, holy shit, like that used to be $3.50 and now it's $7.50. Like,
yeah, I would say that's the Amazonification now.
Okay.
We're at that point.
Yeah.
Where it's just how easy it is to access it from your couch and accessing cheap imported goods. When I think of food costs, I just, like if you talk about a jar of peanut butter, like I don't know if you've had a garden, if you've grown peanuts or vegetables and fruits. I look at what it took to make the peanut butter, and I've always thought food was too cheap. Like I've always felt that way. And I think when people get into gardening or farming, that's one of the first opinions to really be shifted in them, is that they suddenly empathize with the grower, with the producer, because it takes a lot. And technology, or at least the progress of technology and manufacturing, there's not a lot of it happening with food or farming. And what happened in the past created a lot of monocrop agriculture that we've now learned sort of destroys communities in addition to the soil and ecological community around it. So we don't really want to go back to that. So we've naturally, or organically, if you will, shifted to a more organic and natural type of agriculture that exists on a very small micro level, regional food systems, local food systems, farmers markets. And the benefits to that are pretty long. Specifically, you're eliminating middlemen, and you're eliminating a lot of waste, a lot of gas usage, transportation costs, things that aren't really necessary to eat. You can just buy food from the person that grew it and convert it into food yourself. It should be cheaper because you're getting rid of all those things. But then you look at the fact that they're not paying tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars for technology to automate it. They're not paying illegal immigrant labor, $4 an hour to do it. They're trying to make an honest living, and supporting people who are trying to make an honest living is a very honest gesture.
Yeah. I think it's when I grew up and helped like my grandparents with their farms or my great aunt and uncle with their farm. I think I was a kid and it wasn't an option. So I didn't see value in it because it's like, oh no, on Saturday we're just doing this. I didn't see it as work. It was just like, no, this is what we do on this day, if that makes sense.
It does. No kid likes a garden, but a kid that gardens loves it as an adult. It almost always happens.
It was, I keep thinking about doing one here, but I have so many rabbits. I'm like, I would have to build a raised, I was trying to figure out how to do it without getting just absolutely destroyed.
Oh, that makes me think of the movie Phenomenon with John Travolta, where he's trying to figure out why the rabbit keeps eating his carrots or lettuce, and he wakes up in the middle of the night and he's like, I've boxed the rabbit in. It's living in the garden. It's not that it's getting in, it's that it can't get out.
And I think it's because we grew up so poor too. Like we were very fortunate to be able to have a bag of tomatoes for my grandparents, to where that was something we didn't have to purchase. I think that's where I also was like, oh no, it's just part of like a little bit of give and take, or I hate to say give and take. That sounds awful, but you know what I mean? Like it was just, that's like I used to help my dad and uncles move people. They would move people every week. I don't know how. This is so-and-so's cousin's brother, and they're all 6'2", 6'5", 6'4", and they're like, no, we're going to go help them move this weekend.
But so isn't that the good stuff though? Like the good stuff in life, like that's a community, that reciprocity, and to get all philosophical, the Amazonification, to call back what you're saying earlier, that process where you're dehumanizing transactions isolates people, and it rips apart communities. It really does. It really does. And I'm not even just talking about removing retail from the equation, which a lot of people think is the major consequence from Amazon. It's creating a cultural phenomenon, if you will, that people are relying on other people less and less and less and less, and you are becoming very insular, and it hurts communities. And a community, we should at this point know, is one of the most valuable parts of our existence as a species. Having a community, there's a lot that we get from that we need. Without it, it would be probably anarchy.
Yeah, it's weird. I know this sounds naive or pie in the sky. It was after the floods and the storms in Houston a few years ago. And, and it was the heartwarming story on the news of all the people around the block waiting to give blood. And I remember watching that on TV and going, why can't we just be there all the time? Why is it a tragedy is what, these people that are going through their day-to-day life, but I think I don't know. I think it's hard now. I have jokingly started referring these to as entitlement machines.
Your cell phone?
Yeah, my cell phone is an entitlement machine.
Yeah.
Because of how many people are like, well, no, my opinion matters because 3 people liked it on Facebook. Mm-hmm. It's like, no, that doesn't matter. That's another thing I think that is breaking it's building communities in bad ways. And
it is. Apart. Yeah, you take the good with the bad. At some point, you have to calculate whether there's more good or more bad. I still think there's way more good coming from them. I just don't even think it's close with what we're able to accomplish over the course of a day. And then it just comes down to personal accountability and responsibility with how you are as a person.
Yeah.
Those people tend to lose friends, lose jobs, the ones that are narcissistic, and aside from the few that climb to the top of companies, I think good is still winning. I want to believe that. That's my belief. Maybe it's naive as well.
All I think is just, everybody is quick to share all these negative stories and stuff. And I actually started a page, and I can't devote. Same thing. I just said it about the why can't we live in the post-tragedy thing. I started a page called Be More Humble, just like people giving back and doing things like Gary Sinise just did something where I can't remember what he did, but he did something because he's always still been involved with the military and stuff ever since Forrest Gump. Like that really affected him doing that film. And so he has like the Lieutenant Dan Foundation, and they do benefits and stuff. And it was something wild. Like he paid for 300 families that they had lost their loved one in the military, and he paid for them go call. He did something that was insane.
Basically, Scott's Tots that was actually materialized.
Scott's Tots.
Sorry, that was an episode of The Office.
Oh God, yes. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. The kids that came back. Oh my God.
He promised college tuition and couldn't do it, and ended up giving them laptop batteries, I think. Sorry, that was a terrible. I'm so sorry. You were trying to be good, and I just ruined it. Well, I will say that people that like that, with what seems like genuine altruism, when they have success and have money and they choose to continue being that kind of a person, it's really inspiring. I value those people a lot. And it's on us to continue to support the people that we think are like that, because altruism is dying in a sense. When you talk about these little devices in our pockets, everybody wants to share the story of that good thing they did that day, and you want to be a viral story about helping some kid or some person go to college, or saving a duck as it's trapped in a eddy at a lake. Who knows? Whatever. What I'm getting at is altruism. In that, my definition would be doing something good for goodness sake, and nothing else. It's kind of dying.
Yeah.
And part of that could be because it's just so easy to share what you did.
Yeah.
We've always wrestled with that as a social culture. You want people to know about the good things you did.
Yeah.
I don't even know what we're talking about right now. Let's get to dough.
I was going to go back to community. Like, we talked about curation on your menu. Do you feel like when you hire somebody, you're welcoming them into the community that is Adobo, and you have to are you kind of careful with that?
Okay, so there are a couple things I heard from that. When we hire or make the decision to hire someone, we put a lot of thought into it. Well, we put a lot of thought into most of our decisions with the business, because we consider the ramifications of every personality that comes into the group.
Yeah.
Because there are, if you hire someone that is narcissistic or that is incapable of taking direction, or they're defensive, they're going to infect the people around them with that behavior, especially in a workplace environment. And you have to really guard that. You have to guard your culture strongly, in my opinion. So when we're hiring someone, we really try to suss out their character through various questions. You don't always get it right. Sometimes you fail miserably or spectacularly at it. And then you have to address that in the hard conversations, whether it's through discipline or firing, worst case scenario. But we see it as a real honor that people would want to work for us.
Yeah.
So we approach that from a very humble but also proud moment.
Yeah.
And curating the menu, also curating the staff. We actually just had a staff party, and we had 100% participation. So every single employee came, and I just am so proud of that. And it was a +1 invitation, so most people brought a guest, and we had almost 40 people. We went to the Williamswood Castle in South Knoxville.
Oh yeah. I saw pictures of that.
Yeah, and it was
awesome.
just a great time. We had Jenna Baker from Cook to Be Well cater it. So, we have a few people on our staff that are vegan. And I just thought, Jenna cooks vegan food, plant-based food, but it's just delicious. It's just delicious food. We don't have to call it vegan. And so we catered the whole thing. Everything from soup to nuts was vegan.
Yeah.
And it was just, I didn't do that for those 4 people that were vegan, but I thought that was a nice gesture. We can all, it's just food, and it was
It's
fun.
just one meal.
It was delicious.
Yeah.
Everybody loved it. She knocked it out of the park. We had karaoke. There was a ping pong table there. A lot of really good wine, champagne, beer, Cokes, whatever. It was all there, and it went on late. A lot of people sang karaoke, a lot more than I thought would. People who also probably said they wouldn't do it ended up doing it.
Yeah.
And it was one of those moments where it just made you really proud to have the staff that you have
Yeah.
and the people around you, because you hear a lot of restaurant owners and business owners talk about not being able to do it without the people, and it's just so true. You need a good staff to be able to do good things.
I think a lot of people are just filling positions. Filling positions, not my southern, not filling positions. I'll say it, filling positions, as opposed to being no, this is important. And I know you've talked about cutting back on your hours and relying on your staff to be it's going to be okay when I'm not there. So that's, you as a business owner, that's got to be a crazy amount of trust to kind of a bridge to get over on trust.
It is, and it's a catch-22 of sorts.
Okay.
So when you're talking about other businesses just filling positions,
Yeah.
I think that happens when the business owner becomes more disconnected from the business, because when you're relying on other people who don't have any equitable interest in your business to make these decisions, there's just only so much they can do or will want to do. There's a lot that needs to happen. And generally that comes from the top down. What I mean is the selection process and the care and the attention to all those little details. You can teach managers to do it, but the further disconnected an owner gets away from their business, the harder it is to do what we're doing now. You would just by default end up just filling positions because there are only so many hours in the day. So I don't fault restaurants or businesses for getting into that position because it's sometimes it's a natural consequence of growth. But I do have a mission to not let that happen with our growth, and we want to grow for our employees. We don't want to just grow to pay ourselves more. Sure, that's wonderful, and if there's some left over, we'll take it.
Yeah.
But we have people on our staff that have the potential to have a real career. And with one restaurant or just one little tiny concept in 4 walls, you can only do so much for them. And there's a lot more we'd like to do for them and for us. So there's just give and take, like you said earlier, everywhere. We would love to give more, but you also have to take from somewhere else. And it's just one giant balancing act.
Yeah.
But if your focus is on integrity, honesty, things like justice, goodwill, I believe that's a long-term focus.
Yeah.
And that's what we have. We really, really, truly want to be around a long time. And we want our food to remain delicious with whatever iteration it becomes. So we have certain truisms that we follow. And here we go again. This really is a rambling, man.
Yeah. Although I feel like we're delving into, I thought you were going to turn into Superman for the truth, justice, and the American.
Do they not? You can't see the cape I'm wearing, can you? Yeah. Just the cape.
I appreciate you tucking it in, though. I am gonna. I'll weave us in there. I swear. In building that staff and stuff, have you? I'm sure you're open to suggestions from them. Have you ever had a moment to where, or did you have a first moment where they were like, well, what if we did this? And you're like, it was almost like a light bulb went off and went, oh my God, yes. Why are we not doing that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's so valuable to listen to criticism and listen to advice and listen to suggestions. And you can really build an environment where they feel safe coming to you with advice and criticism.
Yeah.
That's important. That comes at the beginning. Really, that comes in the interview.
Oh, okay.
Before the onboarding, making people feel comfortable in a process of communication. So we have had people make recommendations to us on our staff, and we've had guests make recommendations.
Yeah.
And ultimately, we're going to decide whether or not we want to try that recommendation.
Yeah.
And many times we have, whether it's the workflow on our pizzas and how many we're making at a time and how many we can fit in the oven, whether it's where we're storing certain things. I'm having trouble thinking of answers right now, but a lot of it comes to the logistical planning of a restaurant, like where we keep something, how we use something. The people who are using it every day are the ones that are going to know. And so it's so valuable to listen to them.
Right.
And I like to ask people to give us feedback outside of service. When we say service, we mean when we're open for business. So service is the time where we're kind of devoting all of our emotional, mental, and physical energy on the customer.
Mm-hmm.
And if people are making mistakes, we don't harp on those mistakes in service. We do that around service, where that you take a step back for reflection and can actually address it. So those are the times when it's best to do it.
Yeah.
When people are making a sort of a defensive or reflexive suggestion in the moment, it's kind of hard to grow from that. But yeah, we constantly keep our ears open for things like that. I may think of examples as we go on.
Did that take time to get used to, because it is your business and stuff? And I keep saying and stuff because it's your business. You're like, no, this is my vision, or pretty much from the beginning. Was that something kind of strong at like Blackberry Farm, of like almost like rolling with it? Like, no, we need to listen to it and see if it is a better way to do things.
I don't know where I learned that.
Yeah.
I know that I learned a lot about communication from my wife and her family.
Okay.
My family had we dealt with things in a very typical manner, in that we allowed it to fester and then it sort of blew up. But we did address things, but it was like little mini explosions.
I didn't realize you were part of the Collins clan.
So I don't know. I don't know what exactly made. I think it was my experience with them and just understanding how valuable it was to have a direct line of communication.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It comes from us, me and my wife.
Okay.
Just not being too proud to take criticism and understand. Like, you listen to enough podcasts, you read enough books,
Yeah.
you have enough good bosses, enough bad bosses, where at the end of it, in your 30s, you kind of become the person you are.
Yeah.
And you're either a shithead or you're someone that people want to work for and with
Yeah.
and help. And,
Yeah.
and it's an ugly truth. Some people may not ever realize they're the asshole in the room until it's too late, and
Yeah.
the damage is irreparable. I would like to think that we're not that asshole in the room.
Yeah.
I think that's the opposite. And whatever. I'm not going to just keep talking about myself.
Well, I'm going to make fun. I had a former boss that had taped up on her monitor a saying that said, hire people smarter than you and then get out of their way.
Yeah.
But she never followed that. She was very proud that she had that taped up, but then I got told one time, it's like, I don't like that logo's in purple. You need to make it red. Red pops. I was like, we didn't design that logo. We're just printing that job. Yeah, but you need to change that color. It's like, I literally can't because that's the color they want. Well, no, I just don't like purple. I was like, okay, cool.
See, that's it. You choose
Yeah.
your battles in a marriage and relationships and a work environment. Choose your battles. If you're a manager, an owner, and somebody comes to you and they're like, hey, I really think we should do this. One of the first questions I ask is, okay, will this negatively impact the customer? Will this make our food worse?
Right.
And ultimately, will we lose money on it? That's kind of
Right.
that's where I start in priority. And if it passes 2 of 3 of those, if it ever affects the customer in a negative way, no, we're not doing that.
Right.
Sorry. We draw lines at some places. But sometimes it's good to just let them have a win. Give people a win. If you want them to invest in your business, you want them to have pride in it, listen to them and let them try it out. What's
Yeah.
the worst that can happen? And it does take a little bit of practice and humbling yourself, but not being too proud. I can continue to get philosophical, but if you value things a lot, whether it's money or your clothes, and I know I'm dressed well. I
don't know what you're talking about.
I could throw all these away. I don't care that much about stuff.
Yeah.
If you can disassociate yourself from obsessing over the things that you own, it's a lot easier to allow other people in and allow other people to do things
Yeah.
and to run things and to manage things. I obsess over a couple of things on our menu. The dough on our
Yeah.
pizza and the gelato. Those are 2 things where when it's not on point, I become really just frustrated at myself for allowing it to get to that
Yeah.
point. And then I move into diagnosing mode. How can we make it better? And those 2 things really guide the food in our business. And because our menu is so focused, it allows us to it allows it to be a lot easier for us to improve. If we had a very protein heavy menu, lots of different meats,
Yeah.
seafoods, things with a short shelf life, it would be hard to perfect any one of them. But instead, there's just 2 things that guide me
Yeah.
in that restaurant. And because of that, everybody else can look at them too.
Yeah.
They're not overwhelmed. Nobody's overwhelmed. We're able to focus.
Right.
Focus. It's so valuable. If you want people to succeed, put them in a position to succeed.
Yeah. So when you were y'all were starting the restaurant, what made you focus on sourdough as your crust?
I started baking bread. My mother-in-law bought me a book, the Tartine book. A lot of bakers got into that book. Chad Robertson from Tartine in San Francisco wrote it, and it sort of broke down sourdough bread baking in a new way that made it
Yeah.
really accessible. And something about the timing of that book and the arc of his career just happened where it was an explosion in the food world, just an explosion of creativity. A lot of people got into baking. A lot of really smart people got into baking as a hobby, and then Instagram took off, and so bread photos and photos of the crumb structure started popping up everywhere, and it became this, I don't know, phenomenon of the food community. So I was a part of that, in that I was interested in sourdough baking. There's also something really cool from a scientific perspective, that you're just taking flour, water, and salt, and you're turning it into something delicious. And wheat or grains by themselves, raw, are not digestible. Our stomachs can't break them down, and it can become very toxic. So you use techniques like fermentation and
Right.
baking or cooking to make them digestible and nutritious. So just the very nature of bread baking is fascinating to me, especially sourdough bread baking, because in a traditional leavened bread that's not sourdough, like a yeasted bread, you're adding a commercial yeast, whether it's an active dry yeast or a brewer's yeast. You're adding that to your recipe, And that yeast strain takes over and it starts feeding on the sugars and the starches. And its byproduct is gas, is CO2. CO2 tries to leave. It's expanding rapidly. And if you've developed gluten, the gluten traps the gas and it causes the bread to rise. It's just a very straightforward process. And bread rises, yada, yada, yada. Water evaporates from it. It cooks. It gets crusty. It's delicious. Cools down. Cut it. Eat it with butter and olive oil. And it's just one of life's great pleasures. Sourdough bread is the same thing, except you're not adding any yeast. You're capturing it from the flour, from your hands, from the environment that it's in, from the water, although most water in the city is pretty heavily chlorinated, so it's actually kind of working against you. Sourdough is a symbiotic relationship between bacteria and yeasts.
Okay.
And the trick, or the trick with all of it, is balancing those two together to where the dough or your recipe doesn't become overly acidic, because acidity will sort of ruin gluten. Gluten is the lifeblood of bread baking. Gluten traps gas, it causes it to rise, and when bread rises, it allows the dough to cook more evenly, allows the water to evaporate, and then the structure or the cross section of that bread is what you have left. When you cut a loaf down the middle and you open it up and look at it, that we call that the crumb.
Okay.
And an open crumb is one with a bunch of holes, big holes. That's where gas was trapped and it evaporated, and then the gluten held that little cellular structure in place. If your bread doesn't develop gluten and it bakes and it doesn't rise, it has a tendency to be really dense and the structure is very compact and it's not as delicious, which whenever we're talking about food, the objective is to make it delicious for the most part.
Yeah.
We live in a very privileged world where we get to think about things like delicious. For a long time, it was just sustenance. But that's where we are.
Yeah.
And sourdough is very hard to do on a daily basis because you are dealing with a wild yeast. It's not just one strain of yeast that you're getting from a commercial yeast. It's several strains and unknown strains that are existing in the habitat of your sourdough starter. And there are also different types of bacteria, lactobacillus, acetobacteria, like is found in vinegar. All those things are kind of fighting to try to thrive. Temperature is probably the single greatest variable with managing a culture. Warmer temperatures encourage yeast growth. Colder temperatures discourage that, but also encourage acidity and bacterial growth.
Okay.
So once you start changing temperatures, like the nature of your starter will change dramatically. So a sourdough starter is something that you feed on a regular basis or to a schedule. Some people feed it once a day, once every other day, twice a day, thrice a day. And this starter is the lifeblood. The starter is like the lifeblood of your dough. You try to keep it at a constant temperature. You have certain hydration amounts of water that you put into it, inoculation rates, whereas like how much old starter you're introducing to it, because that's what you do. You take a little bit of your old starter to feed the new one, and then it goes through a growth phase where it rises and falls and depletes all of its resources. I like sourdough because all that stuff I just said to you keeps your mind busy.
Yeah.
It's complicated, it's complex, it's wonderful and wild. And if you want to love what you do, I think I do. I want to love what I do. And if it were just easy and on autopilot all the time, I don't think I would love that, me personally. So choosing a pizza that had a wild yeast did that. And there are also some nutritional elements to it. There are people that say, and studies that suggest that sourdough or naturally fermented bread is better for your digestion.
Okay.
I haven't read case studies and followed up on that. There are a lot of people that come to the restaurant and say, why can I eat your pizza, but I can't eat this pizza? And that's great. That's probably some of that's confirmation bias. Some of it could be because of the natural leaven. And so there's a nutritional benefit to it. And then also a little bit of a marketing benefit.
Okay.
People see that and they're like, oh, that's something different. That's probably the lowest on the totem pole of reasons. The biggest one being it's just really fun to learn.
And it's going back to Domino's. It's different than Domino's. It's special. Like there's a group on Facebook called Knox Food or something that's kind of weird, but every once in a while somebody would pop on. This is before you all. This is kind of like 6 months into Knox Mason being started, and somebody who lived in like Loudon or something was like, "It's my wife and I's anniversary. What should we do?" And I just typed in there. I was like, "You should go to Knox Mason and eat." And then this is still when downtown, because back then it's maybe a third of what it is now. Like, it's like, go to Knox Mason. It's something other than, no offense, Tupelo honey.
Which hadn't opened yet, by the way.
Oh, had it not?
No.
Okay.
But I hear you loud and clear.
Yeah. Take her there. It'll be something that you all are not used to. It's going to be unique. It's going to be interesting. And then go to the Peter Kern Library and for a cocktail, because it's not a beer at Wild Wing Cafe. And I think the guy ended up DMing me afterwards. He's like, "That's what we did," and holy shit. And I was like, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a unique experience. It's something completely different.
Yeah.
Even the space that you all have kind of pulled together in there, it's something, it's on its own.
Yeah.
It's not in the middle of Market Square. Like, it's its own thing.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
I'm happy for that. Yeah. It's really exciting.
Something I thought of in there, does the humidity level or the temperature outside affect the bacteria in any way?
Absolutely. Of course.
Okay.
So bakers express recipes in percentages.
Okay.
And the way we do it, and which is pretty standard, is the total weight of the flour in your recipe is expressed as 100%. So let's just say we had a dough that's a 50% hydration dough.
Okay.
You would take the weight of the flour, and we also use the metric system because it just makes so much more sense.
Yeah.
Say you have 1,000 grams of flour or a kilogram. If you wanted a 50% hydration dough, that means 50% of the weight of the flour needs to be water.
Okay.
So 500 grams of water, 1,000 grams of flour. That's it. I've just told you how to make a 50%
Yeah.
hydrated dough.
Yeah.
So water is a big part of the recipe, your hydration. Let's say we're doing a pizza dough and it's a 68% hydration dough and it's really humid. The relative humidity is up. That dough is going to absorb the water, and it's not going to be a true 68%. It's going to be a little more wet. And why does that matter? So water encourages the sourdough cycle. So the more water you have in it, the faster the bacteria will feed. So it's going to ferment faster. That's
Okay.
one thing. Water also encourages what we call extensibility. So extensibility is the opposite of elasticity. Elasticity is when dough bounces back like a rubber band. Extensibility is when it just doesn't bounce back at all and it stretches. So making bread and making pizza are not the same thing, but they're very similar in that you're balancing extensibility and elasticity. So the more water you have, the more extensible it becomes. And when you're shaping pizza dough, you want it to open up, the dough ball to open up into its round pizza shape as easily as possible. You don't want to have to force it open. If it's overly elastic, it's going to bounce back and it will likely tear. Water affects that. Fermentation affects that. If a dough is under fermented, we find that it generally is a little more extensible. If it's way over fermented and the gluten structure has been kind of dissolved by the acidity, it's elastic and it will tear when you stretch it. So yes, humidity affects that.
Okay.
Temperature affects that. Salinity, the amount of salt in your dough, affects that because salt naturally retards yeast and bacterial growth. It's antimicrobial. Right. So when you introduce salt to your medium or to your dough is also really important. Other things like what we call an autolyse or autolysis, I don't know the pronunciation of it. Technically, it's the hydration period of your flour and your water. Some people do it with the starter, some people do it without. You can have a long autolyse period where it's just water and flour sitting, getting to know each other, and that water is absorbing into the flour, and that encourages extensibility. I think I need you to ask me a question because I'm about to tailspin into other weird stuff about dough. So
okay, do you? I want to get back to water, but I do. And you just saying that this is a great transition. Do you think it takes a certain kind of mind to get into bread making, like a very meticulous mind? Because I think of the people I've known that made bread, and they're very like, I need to do it this. There's a famous comedian, Tom Papa, that's what he's kind of known for in the comedy community. Is he's always bringing, and he was like, no, I do this, and I do, it's very.
I think good bakers are very meticulous.
Okay.
I don't think you have to be meticulous to get into baking, but if you want to be good at it, it happens. You have to be somewhat meticulous. You pay attention to a lot of things.
Yeah.
And when you dive into the subject, it can't be oversimplified. It's complex, and it gets a little nerdy and geeky, and some people just don't have enough time in their day or desire to even care about. A lot of people are probably turning this podcast off because they thought we were going to talk about something else, and that's fine. Like, we all have our own interests, and if those things interest you, great. But yeah, it may be a certain mind. Inquisitive, I would say. Inquisitive more so than meticulous.
Okay. Because I
People who
also
are
feel
curious.
like it's a lot of work, and you have a small window to where your bread is actually, I don't want to say perfect, but good.
Absolutely, and it's the same with pizza. We talk about that window where the pizza is just perfect.
Yeah.
And you feel a little crazy. I do at times making a sourdough pizza venture because our window is even smaller than other pizzerias where they're using a yeasted dough that can sit in the fridge for a week, and you can pull it out and shape it and let it proof, and it's going to be relatively consistent day to day. And consistency is one of those things that restaurants can live and die by. So finding consistency with a sourdough is very hard. But it's also, like all those things I said before, very fun, nutritious, and it encourages a lot of professional development just by virtue of its complexity.
Okay. And even like the wood-fired aspect of it all, that came from working in the Greek restaurant when you were younger, kind of?
That was where the seed was planted.
Okay.
Wood. People think that wood is imparting flavor, like a smoke or something, and that it doesn't happen with our pizzas because they bake so quickly.
Yeah.
Wood allows us to get it really, really hot. And we're now at a point where you can get a gas or an electric oven that's getting just as hot as some of these ovens.
Okay.
But historically, wood was the only way to achieve close to 1,000 degrees in this dome oven. It was pretty hard. The ovens just weren't being built. So for a long time, wood was really the only way to do that, to cook a Neapolitan style. And in the last 5 years, that's changed. You can now do our exact pizzas in a gas oven, and nobody would know the difference. So really, today, the wood oven is more a showpiece. It's an emotional thing that the guests really like, which I don't discount. I see the value in that. People get excited. They want to bring their kid over to the oven and feel the warmth from it. And that could all happen with the gas oven too. But let's be honest, if that was just a tube of fire coming up from a gas line, people would feel very differently about it. And we're in the business of making people feel good. So you have to consider all those things.
Yeah. You mentioned a word there, Neapolitan. So maybe describe what is the difference between a Neapolitan pizza. I hate saying regular pizza, but I think there is
what you know.
Yeah, I think there is a standard for because I think, people know Chicago pizza, people know New York pizza, and then I would think like regular pizza. Now, I've also heard recently, just in the last year, I've started hearing about Detroit-style pizza.
Yeah.
And I can't even remember what Detroit-style pizza is, but that it was something completely different. And within regular, you have flat, you have pan, all that stuff. But there's still a standard, or what we're used to, I guess, is the best way to put it. So what is Neapolitan-style pizza?
I would say you know a lot more about pizza than you think, so give yourself a little more credit. Okay, so that is a good question. What is Neapolitan-style pizza, and why is it any different? There are a lot of styles of pizza, and we'll talk about some of them here. Neapolitan style, some say, and I would agree with, is really the first style of pizza to kind of come around in the world.
Okay.
And it originates from Naples, Italy. It was originally a very cheap food that was made in these old wood ovens in Naples, and it was food that was very simple and easy to eat. It's what we now know of Neapolitan pizza is it's a type of pizza that's cooked very quickly in a very hot brick oven.
Okay.
the VPN, which is called Vera Pizza Napolitana. It's this governing agency that decides whether or not something can be authenticated as Neapolitan. And they have certain rules which we don't really care about or follow. But I think to answer your question, it helps. The flour needs to be a certain type of flour. They say a 00 flour, which has to do with the mill, how it's milled. There needs to be a plum-style, Italian-style tomato, whether it's actually from Italy, a San Marzano. Okay. That doesn't have to be the case. But it's that style of flour, that style of tomato sauce, and then mozzarella, preferably fior di latte, which is a cow's milk mozzarella, fresh mozzarella, relatively wet mozzarella, and fresh basil. And some people would say it could have a drizzle of pecorino cheese or Parmigiano cheese or a drizzle of olive oil to be considered Neapolitan. There's two real styles of Neapolitan pizza, the margherita and the marinara. Those are the basics. And a marinara is really just it doesn't have cheese. It can have any number of herbs and garlic and olive oil, but traditionally it's oregano. We more casually describe Neapolitan as a wetter pizza that is often eaten with a knife and fork. In Naples, they don't cut it. And the reason for that is the pizza cooks in about 60 to 80 seconds, close to 900,000 degrees. And when it comes out of the oven, it's still cooking, and it's like glistening and bubbling and steaming. And then they drop it off to the table uncut, and you eat it with a fork and knife, and they'll fold it. And that's just how it's done in that culture. But if you cut it right away while the pizza's continuing to de-steam and cook, you're not allowing the crust to set. A pizza sort of needs to set like a good steak. You don't cut it right away or the juices come out.
Yeah.
There's some similarities there. The American audience doesn't like a pizza that's uncut. They want it cut for them. So that's a little bit harder. So we cut it. We try to let it sit for a second before we do that. But a Neapolitan pizza is a relatively lower hydrated dough. I used to think it was high, but we'll get into that in a second. Cooked very quickly in a very hot oven. Generally, the toppings are minimal. There are not a lot of toppings on it because the crust is very supple. It's generally softer. It's not supposed to be crispy. And it's, like I said, wet. So it's very different from what Americans think of as pizza, even though it really was the first pizza, and where all the pizza we eat now kind of came out of these Italians that had immigrated to New York in the New Haven area and started opening up pizzerias. They were basing it off of what they knew of as Neapolitan, but it became a hybrid when they couldn't access the same ingredients. And then bake times started getting a little bit longer. Hydration started getting different. And of course, the types of mozzarella, weren't available. Tomatoes were different. So pizza then just started changing, and then they would move throughout the country and open up their own version of it. And then they would start using what they had available. You asked what's Detroit-style pizza. Detroit-style pizza is pizza that's cooked in a pan. To my understanding, it's a fortified dough, which means there's a certain amount of fat in it.
Oh, okay.
And fat will shorten gluten strands and make it a little bit softer.
Okay.
And it's cooked in a pan because it's a little bit harder to handle. It's generally par-baked with some sauce and some cheese on it, and then baked a second time to order. But it's Detroit-style pizza is delicious square pizza cooked in a pan. Yeah. Generally, the edges of the pizza will have what's called like a frico crust, which is just the caramelized cheese that browns and gets really delicious and greasy and crispy. And it's square cut pizza. It's thicker. A lot of people think that Detroit-style pizza hails from what people commonly refer to Sicilian-style or grandma-style pizza, which were the Sicilian grandmas in the U.S. that used to make pizza for their family. They would use the pizza from their homeland, which was pizza that's cooked in a pan that probably had some olive oil in it. A little bit harder to handle. That's why you cook it in a pan. And that's another thing. Yeah. When you're cooking pizza directly on a hearth, it needs to be a little bit easier to stretch and handle and release from a peel. If it's very wet and very gassy, you probably need to cook it in a pan so it can contain the dough from spilling out. Okay. Or if it needs a second proof, and a proof is the final rise that you allow a dough to get. So all these adaptations really came out of necessity. New York style, which came from Neapolitan style, is cooked directly on a deck, slightly higher hydration, meaning you can bake it longer. So the longer the bake, the more water you need in the dough to prevent it from drying out. So if you have like a really crackery dough, it means that all the moisture really cooked out of it, and what was left was something that's crispy. If there is still water in the dough or it didn't all cook out, it can be softer and more supple, like a Neapolitan style. New York style is what most of us think of when they think of pizza. It's flour, water, salt, yeast. Sometimes you can put fat in it, like olive oil or butter.
Yeah.
Some people put honey in it because sugar accelerates the fermentation process.
Okay.
Whatever. And then on a big scale, like Domino's or Papa John's, they'll put things like dough conditioning agents in it and preservatives to extend the shelf life of the dough, so it can be made in a commissary kitchen, shipped around the country. And then that kind of economic growth led to sort of the quality going way down, because whenever you try to increase the shelf life of something, generally the quality goes down because you're introducing a lot of foreign subjects into the recipe. So for a good bit of 20, 30 years in middle America and places like Knoxville and just random towns that weren't near a big city, the only pizza they knew was big box pizza. And that pizza was just shitty. It was just bad. It was hard on your stomach. It was a gut bomb of cheese and fat and flour that wasn't fermented properly and was filled with things that your body isn't meant to digest. So there's a real revolution happening in the pizza world now, where whatever the style is, whether it's New York, Detroit style, Neapolitan style, a cracker style, there's like a Kansas City style, where like Amici and Maryville, they do more of a cracker crust.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, where you roll it out in a sheeter or a rolling pin, and you don't want a lot of bubbles. You want it to be flat and crispy, which is awesome too. But there's a real move to understand fermentation, because the fermentation process is what's converting the wheat into a product that's digestible to a human stomach. And you can't really skip over that. If you skip over that, you're going to be left with an inferior product.
Yeah.
And that's the most complex, difficult part of making any dough is the fermentation schedule. So Neapolitan, what we do is a very quick bake. It's a little bit harder to eat, generally meant to be eaten with a knife and a fork. And the toppings are not supposed to be very heavy. So if you're adding a lot of things to it, you're kind of ruining the pizza. It's meant to be eaten as simply as possible.
And it's a thinner crust.
It's a thinner crust. Yeah, it's a thinner crust. That's what that is.
Okay.
There are other styles. There's a Roman style of pizza, which is cooked in a pan. There's two styles of Rome, Italy. There's pizza al taglio, which is like they're by the slice. It's cooked in these like thin steel pans, big rectangular pizzas that are cooked and then reheated on the hearth. And you'll see people walking around Rome eating little square pieces. There's also pizza alla palla, which palla means peel. That's like the peel you drop the dough off of into the oven. You see people we have a peel. It's a metal peel that we'll release the pizzas from into the oven. In Rome, they have these long wooden peels, and they'll cook the same style of dough as the al taglio, but instead of cooking it in a pan, they cook it directly on the hearth. Okay. So those are their two styles. And that's generally a higher hydrated dough. There's more water in it. Like I said, the longer the bake, the more water you need. Yeah. It's a little bit harder to handle. So alla palla is a fun style because it's really technique driven. The wetter a dough is, the harder, the more extensible, the more it just wants to open up like water. The closer it is to being water, the harder it is to handle, right? That kind of makes sense. And the opposite is also true. So, we're getting into that right now. We're learning a lot about the Roman style. I think it's a really fun style of pizza. It's sort of the opposite of Neapolitan in that it's crispy. You can eat it with your hands, and it could open up ideas for lunch and for takeaway and a lot of really cool things.
Yeah. Because I think you had told me before, like, the optimal way for people to eat Adobo's pizza is to come in there, sit down, order it, eat it there.
Exactly.
Taking it home is hard. So, like, why is that? Why is it taking away? It's because it loses its consistency.
Yeah, when you put any pizza in a pizza box, the quality is going to degrade very rapidly, especially if it's hot, because that box will trap the steam. The steam will then soften the crust and make it soggy and chewy and hard to handle, all things that ruins pizza. Right. And we've just sort of dealt with that, and big pizza chains have had technological advancements that have made it easier to do that. But at some point along the way, it's like we all just agreed to be eating inferior pizza. We were like, okay, we're okay with this. because it's cheap and it's a commodity and it's something that you can feed a family of 10 for, under $100. And then that's just the way we looked at it for a while. And now people are like, you know what? I don't want that anymore. And those are the people that we're going for. And those are the people that we are.
Yeah.
Life is short, and I like to eat good food.
I had Domino's for the first time the other night, just because it was like 9:30, and my cousin was like, okay. I was telling him, I'm starving. He's like, what are you doing for food? I was like, oh God, you're wanting, okay, we'll do pizza. What do you want? He's like, well, Domino's. It's like, all right, let's get Domino's. And I ate it, and I was like, this is not good. Like, I was like, no offense, Domino's, but I was like, I think it's because all I eat is you all, Pizzeria Nora, and Harvey's. I think that's it for pizza. So I'm also a big shop local. I like.
Well, thanks. Pizza.
Yeah.
I like to think of it like this: like, how does something make you feel after you're eating it? And I said this a little bit earlier, but pizza specifically, like, really, how do you feel after eating it? How do you feel when you're home?
Yeah.
Are you staying up at night because of all the salt? Is it like making you sweat? It's dehydrating you. Do you have a headache? Is your stomach hurt because of all that fat and the unfermented flour that's in your stomach? Like, people don't know why they feel bad and why they feel good. They just know how they feel.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to sort of preempt that.
Okay.
By giving them something that they're still going to feel good eating. And it's not like a health nut thing. It's just paying attention to the process and understanding fermentation. So if Domino's makes me feel fine after I eat it, then I'll eat Domino's. Mm-hmm. I'm cool with that. But generally, the times that I've had it recently, especially now that my body's adjusted to kind of more naturally fermented doughs and breads, and properly fermented doughs, I don't want to go back to that stuff that makes me feel bad.
Yeah.
Like, I used to eat, I shouldn't say names, I used to eat Jets occasionally.
Yeah.
And it's like,
their deep dish is pretty good.
First bite, like, my mouth is watering right now just thinking about it. But if you have, after the second and third slice, like, it's a tough one to handle. Like, I get really dehydrated because maybe I'm sensitive to salt, and some people would probably laugh if they heard me say that, because I am. I consider salt very valuable, and it needs to be used in moderation. And if something is really salty and it dehydrates me, I'll get a headache, or I'll feel really heavy and lethargic, and I don't like to feel like that.
So when I was working at the print shop and didn't have a lot of money, every Friday I would stop and get some pizza without naming names.
I grew up on Little Caesars.
The $5 take and goes. And so then there hit a point later on when I was working at the paper where we got what we were making slashed due to the economy. And I started going back to that, and I did it like 3 weeks in a row. And I was like, I've gotten sick all 3 times. I was like, I'm done with this. I was like, it's a cheap option, but it's a cheap option, and it's not making me feel well. Mm-hmm. I think it's just exactly what you're saying. Time had passed. And in that interim, I'd gotten used to eating like Harvey's, which is quality pizza. I always laugh because I'm like, man, growing up, Pizza Hut pizza cooked in that cast iron skillet and they made it fresh was amazing. It felt like a hometown. Now, it was crazy high on salt and sodium, but it was just like, it actually felt like a local place because there was one right over here. And I was like, man, last time I had Pizza Hut, I was like, this is not exactly what you're saying. This feels like mass produced or like it's chunked out. Yeah.
Yeah. And people harp on things that are mass produced or that aren't local, I think sometimes for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
It can still be good and be mass produced, but it's just harder to make it good, in my opinion. And a lot of those chains started off as great places. Their food supply was much more regional. They were making a lot of things in-house. And once you start taking away that like individual autonomy in any food business, like Zingerman's Deli in Ann Arbor, Michigan, they're a great company to follow. They've got a lot of small businesses that have naturally or organically grown off of what the original business was, which was a deli. And they talk a lot about autonomy and also some degree equity, where their partners have some equity interest in the business, but that they know, or at least they understand the concept of when you franchise or build multiple locations, the third and the fourth and the fifth location, they'll never feel like that first one. They never will. They just won't. It doesn't have the same energy. And ultimately, the product will change dramatically because you have to make sacrifices to do things
Yeah.
at scale. And a lot of people just can't, you don't get that right. Once you start going for scale with food and with the processes involved with food, it's a slippery slope of quality. Like we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
the same thing happens to other places when they start doing more and more and more and more. And we're at that point now where we're just kind of looking at our growth options. And our priorities are the food and the service.
Right.
So we keep coming back to that. And so when we grow, I'd like to think we're growing similar to a Zingerman's in that we're going to be pulled into a tiny market where we can really have autonomy of that and
Yeah.
be good, each one be good, and try to not disrupt each individual thing that gets created. Like
Yeah.
I don't want 4, 5, 6, 3 Adobos around town. I don't want that.
No.
If we opened up another pizzeria around town, I would like it to be a different style of pizza.
Yeah.
Something that's different that we can perfect and hone and work on. And that's fun to me.
Yeah.
Or maybe not even pizza, maybe focusing on wine or, other types of deli food or pasta or, importing. I'd love to get into importing. We started importing olive oil. I'd like to look at importing wine if that's not a conflict of interest after these tariffs go away.
Yeah.
And cheeses, I'm thinking about a dairy. I mean, we make mozzarella now in-house and occasionally ricotta. I'd love to have a dairy,
Yeah.
a small micro dairy where we're just making cheeses for the businesses. Like those are all things that could be profitable and they sound like a pipe dream. But if you have a business model to support it or to buy from it,
Yeah.
it can all feed off each other. And that stuff excites me.
Yeah. Well, it's like now there are going to be 2 bakeries, Paisan, or however you pronounce that. Is it
I think it's Paisan.
Paisan. I keep on going, Paisan, doing the hand motion.
I believe it's a French term, but I
yeah.
like it. I like the Italian gesture.
And the one over next to Hen Hawk.
So that's not happening anymore.
Oh, is it not?
Yeah, needed.
Needed.
Yep, it's not happening
Oh,
anymore.
that's well, but I was thinking of like Knoxville and growth and like, wow, if you had said 10 years ago we were going to have 2 local bakeries within 2 miles of one another or a mile and a half, whatever it is, it's like, that's kind of insane to me. Because I grew up where you would randomly see like a Marita's storefront. There was one on Central, up past Happy, in between Central Collective and Happy Holler.
Yep, up on the right.
Yeah, there was that. There was one, I think it may still be out there near Easttown Mall. But they were almost like castaways or stuff, day olds and stuff like that. But that just kind of, okay, well, that's
those big businesses are going for volume.
Yeah.
They're big, and there's only room for 1 or
Yeah.
2. What we're talking about now is not big. It's small. You're operating on margin. And while you still do a lot in that location, it's just a very different business model.
Yeah.
And you have people that can be owner-operators. They control their destiny. They control their menu. And they exist in the community at a very surface level, which is so valuable for the community.
Yeah.
And a lot of those can exist. That's why we can have, how many coffee shops we have in the area between
God, yeah.
the 3 with Wild Love, Pearl, and Java, Remedy, K-Brew, goodness, like Awaken,
Honeybee. And then not only that, all the coffee carts and trailers.
Yeah.
Like there's
Vienna
at least,
Coffee House.
Yeah, there's at least 5 coffee carts or trailers right now.
Highline Coffee.
Yeah.
All of these things can coexist because they're run by, in my opinion, generally very honest people that want to make a living for themselves, and they don't need to sell coffee to everyone.
No.
Same with us. We don't need to sell pizza to everyone. Like we don't want to, we don't have to, we don't have that desire.
Yeah.
Those businesses within the food and hospitality realm, those are so valuable because they encourage such a strong community. Going back to that term of community, like you have the coffee shops you go to or the pizzerias you go to or the breweries that you go to, and you feel connected to a community, which is, it all comes back to that. It all comes back to the community and how you feel and where you're participating and where you're loved and wanted and needed.
Yeah.
So big giant Maritas, goodbye to those. I'm
Yeah.
like, enough of that. We've had that. We lived through that world of food, and I don't want that anymore.
Yeah.
I don't.
I love the smell. Driving by, that smell of that fresh baked bread is
Sure.
That's a winner anytime. But it doesn't have to be big to be that. Like just the smell of fresh baked bread is.
Yeah, but just picturing like a few manufacturer workers with hairnets on an assembly line in big, which that sounds a little grumpy to me to think like that, but all of the art and that process is stripped out of it. It's just a money-making scheme.
It's just
that's all it is.
Line items on a sheet.
It's all it is, and it's probably owned by someone that doesn't even understand bread or care about bread, or even their employees. And some of them might. Some, like there are companies like King Arthur, that the flour company, like they're an employee-owned company. It's a great model.
Yeah.
It is possible to be big and be virtuous, and I love that, and they should be applauded more than most. But generally that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
The bigger you get, if you become public or you have shareholders and stakeholders, all it is appealing to them.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. All I think of is like when Flourhead first came out and they were at the farmer's market picking up a fresh loaf from Flourhead and bringing it home and putting butter or putting something on it that I bought at the farmer's market. I was like, good, sweet Lord. Yeah. Like this is, I'm going to try not to eat this entire loaf in one day because it's so damn good.
See, I think Tomato Head is a really cool model. Like they are the stalwart of downtown restaurants. They've been around a long time. And then they really, what we would say, vertically integrated by like kind of digging deeper into your process. Like, let's say you're brewing beer. Maybe you now own a farm that grows the hops, right? You're owning every step of the way. They started the wholesale bakery, and they're doing the wholesale products that they use in the restaurant and other places. And that's really smart from a business model standpoint. And I'm sure that they could talk for a long time about the sacrifices they've had to make as they scale up to support multiple locations. And there's a fine line. I think they've balanced that line really well.
And mass producing stuff like hummus in Kroger, like them and Magpies, like Peggy, like it blows my mind. It's like
those are the success stories that a town is lucky to have.
Yeah. You touched a little bit on expansion or future plans. Is that something you all are just still thinking about or not ready to talk about? But
we can talk about it.
Yeah.
Last fall we bought our building. I think I've told every person in the world that, and I probably look like a real ass of how often I say it.
You told me, but I was like, I don't know if that's on mic thing or off mic.
I don't say. I really truly don't say that to brag. I say that because I'm so like proud of what my wife and I were able to accomplish. Yeah. It's exciting. It's exciting to just have control over our rent and our destiny. And if we want to put an awning on our building and spend $12,000 or get a loan out, like we're putting that into an asset that we own.
Yeah.
And that's just that's important. I think people, as their business grows, getting into real estate is a natural progression for people who want security. And safety in their venture. So we did that last fall. We've owned it for over a year now. And the building is like 6,000 square feet. The restaurant is operating in about a third of it. There's us, and then behind us was an empty space. It was a photographer who had a studio there, and he's since moved out, and we've used that space for storage for a good bit of that year. And then behind that is an architect and a furniture fabricator named Forrest Kirkpatrick. I think you know him.
Yeah.
His company's Fork Design. So he's a tenant of ours now, and between us is this empty space. So, we had been approached to do other adobos, and we're not going to do that, at least not anytime soon. And we decided we're just going to use our building. We have this building. We're paying for the rent to ourselves. And so we're doing a very small expansion in that space. We're extending our kitchen out backwards and putting in a lot more storage, more coolers, and we're going to make it just easier on the staff to do more.
Okay.
And we're also going to have a private dining room back there. So we're mid-construction, we got a plumbing inspection this morning, our final plumbing inspection this morning.
Nice.
Cutting trenches, laying pipes, new electrical, painting, new fixtures will be coming in. And the way I see that space being used is really an all-purpose space.
Yeah.
That one day could be maybe a wine bar or a place to have overflow for when we get on a long wait on the weekends. pop-up dinners, but also testing other pizzeria concepts to touch
Yeah.
on what we just talked about. We love Neapolitan style, but there are a lot of other styles that I think are fun to make,
Yeah.
that are delicious, that just still aren't being done well in Knoxville. Like
Okay.
Knoxville's still stuck in a time warp where, like, there's a pizzeria that was making a New York style pizza, and I was talking to someone that worked there, and they were talking about all the ingredients that went into their dough, and it was like they were putting milk and honey and eggs and fat, like a really cheap oil in their dough, and like a cheap high gluten flour. And like to me, I just feel like that's such an old mindset where
Yeah.
somebody is just doing it because that's the way it's always been done.
Yeah.
You know, you have this person that started a business 70 years ago, and they're like, we don't change the recipe for anything, and you
Yeah.
just do it that way. No one ever questions it. Nobody's
Yeah.
like, well, should we maybe not put honey in the? Do we want to accelerate
Yeah.
fermentation? Maybe our dough is over fermented. Maybe our product is bad. Nobody's asking that. And I hate to sound like this, and I'm not going to call anybody out by name, but there are a lot of those places that still exist around town. They
Yeah.
only care so much about the actual product, and it is just a money-making venture for them.
Yeah.
And I think there's a huge opportunity locally for people to do good things in
Yeah.
a lot of genres of food.
That's. Have you ever been to It's Also Yummy Cafe?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I love Kim to death. I love that she does a monthly special, and that she has her, now that she's expanded into where Monster Subs was, has her test kitchen back there. And she just, it's still, I talked to her the other day, and it's still exciting for her. And I was
That's
like,
beautiful.
I love it. I love it. I was like, that damn chicken and waffle sandwich you had, please bring that back. And there was 1 month, she's like, what we're going to do is do a best of. And everything we've done is our specialty monthly sandwiches. We're going to bring them back for a few days. So you're going to have a few days just to get that. And she was like, your chicken and waffle. I was like, I'm not kidding. I'll be here 6 times eating the damn chicken and waffle. She had a hot chicken soup that she made that was just like, this is stupid. Like, this is insanely good. It was crazy.
That's great.
So that's when I'm hearing you talk about expansion, I was like, oh man, that's like, I can see fire in your eyes. Like, oh man, we get to do some cool shit. Like,
There is a feeling like that this just doesn't get old. Like
Yeah.
when a pizza comes out perfect, when you're in that window and it's like the sweet spot, it really is magical, and it does not get old. It
Yeah.
doesn't get old because you know what it takes to get there. You know, if you trust the process and you have those moments of clarity, it's very, very exciting.
yeah. Okay, and then all this talk of pizza, I have not heard the word Chicago come out of your mind. So is that casserole or is that pizza?
So my dad grew up in Chicago.
Okay.
And I'm genetically predisposed to all things Chicago sports and Chicago culture. And we used
Bears
to
and
watch,
Blackhawks right here.
We used to watch
Yeah.
the Bears Patriots Super Bowl on Christmas morning. We had a VHS copy of it. We have family photos wearing jerseys of
Yeah.
Mike Singletary, whatever.
You named my guy. I have his
Yeah.
rookie card right up there.
So, yes, we can talk about Chicago, and it can go deep. There are primarily 2 styles of pizza that came out of Chicago.
Okay.
What most people know as the deep dish casserole style.
Yeah.
And then the tavern style pizza, which is a pan pizza.
Okay.
Home Run Inn is more notable pan tavern style pizza out of Chicago. And then Lou Malnati's is a big
Yeah.
deep dish style one. There's a
Yeah.
couple. I can't think of the second big one.
I think the
It may come
one
to me.
I've had is Lou Malnati's. I've actually had like 2 or 3, but the last one I had that I remember was Lou Malnati's.
Yeah. So we used to drive up there. My dad and I would take trips every summer to go watch the Cubs and stay with his brother and sister-in-law, my cousins, and his mom lived up there. So we would go and went to Wrigley Field for many years and
Yeah.
had some really sweet experiences there. And our style that our family would go to would be the tavern style, would be Home Run Inn. And it was usually a sausage pizza with like I think it's called the pinch and release sausage. I don't know. They put raw sausage on the pizza, and the bake is long enough to where it cooks the sausage fully.
Okay.
So for us, our bake is so short where we have to put like our sausage is what we call andouille, which is made from already cured meats. So
Okay.
it's such a quick bake. If we put raw sausage on, it would come out still raw.
Okay.
There's this sausage pizza from Home Run Inn that I crave. And
Yeah.
it's heavy, and probably the closest to that would be Little Joe's out in deep in Farragut, closer to Lenore City.
I think that's them and Little Nicky's are the two that I've always heard about, but I've never made it to. Little Joe's or Little Nicky's. Yeah.
And Little Joe's has been around a really long time. And anyway, so I've been to Lou Malnati's as well. I cannot think for the life of me the other deep dish. Yeah, people call it a casserole. It's a very long bake. It's multiple layers of dough and cheese and meat.
Yeah.
And it's a pie, really. It's a pie, and I don't care if people call it a pizza or not a pizza. That just doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
It's pizza.
It's good.
We can know it as pizza.
It's a lot of bread, too.
It's really good. It takes
Yeah.
a long time to bake. It's a very different experience, and people love it. It's not the thing that I'm going to gravitate
Yeah.
to, but some of that's just circumstantial based off of my childhood, you know.
I wonder if I can find it. I'll show you a picture of the pizza I ate in Jacksonville at this place called Moon Pie or something like that. I swear, and I've got a picture of the menu so I can tell you what was on it. I swear to God, it was a medium, and it was about that big. For the people at home, I did maybe like 2 foot in diameter.
It's an 18-inch pizza. He's holding 19, 20. Stop. What is it?
It's somewhere
18
around
inches.
there.
Okay.
Somewhere around there. And they set it down, and they brought 2 plates because it's my buddy Jason and I. And they were like, do you need it? I was like, no, we don't need the plates. And they're like, oh, are you both? I was like, this is not for both of us. This is for me. And the waitress was like, what? I was like, yeah, I'll eat this whole thing. I was starving. Like, I had been traveling since like 2:30 or 3 in the morning. This was like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I had nothing to eat. I was dying. Like, I had a killer headache. And I didn't realize a medium was going to be that big. But I was like, screw it. I'm going to eat.
It's like Starbucks calling their medium a grande.
Yeah. Yeah.
Come on.
And so another thing I liked about them is their little placards. Instead of using like numbers or anything, they had wrestlers. So we got Ric Flair. I was like, I like this place. I like this place.
Oh, I have to interrupt you. I had a T-shirt. It was a Wu-Tang T-shirt, and over the woo is a photo of Ric Flair's face wooing.
So I posted up on Facebook. Somebody had photoshopped and made, you can like, heart. They're like, hey, Facebook, get on this. And one of them was a photo of Ric Flair and said, woo, that you could woo a post. I was like, oh. And then some guy came over that he sounded like he was from New York or something. And he was like, you're not, because he brought Jason's calzone, which was the size of a football. And they were like, he set it down. He's like, wait, are you all going to share? And it's like, no, we're not going to share. I'm going to eat this entire
So this was
pizza.
like a John Candy Great Outdoor scenario with the 96 ouncer.
The old 96er.
Old 96er, yeah.
Yeah, I got to eat the gristle. I ate the crust. But the guy was like, are you really going to eat the whole thing? I was like, yes, we're going to a football game after this. I got nowhere to put this. And I sat there. But we sat there for like an hour and a half, 2 hours, and I ate that entire damn thing. And that guy came over. He's like, good God, man. I was like, dude, I don't know what to tell you, man. I was like, I was hungry, and I'm a big boy. And it was so good. It was so salty. It was so good.
Yeah.
It so hit the spot. After that, we went to a cigar shop, and I was laying there. I was like, am I tired because I've been up since 2:30 in the morning traveling?
Or are you tired because you ate 4,000 calories?
Probably that. So here's a weird fact. I put in like one of those calculators of like age, height, and weight, and how active I was, and it said I should eat 4,700 calories a day to maintain. Damn. I was like, I don't eat 4,700. Hell, I barely eat 2,500 calories in a day. It's like, that's insane. We had touched on it earlier, and before I want to close this thread. The water. You had talked about the water had chlorine in it.
Yeah, good memory.
Yeah.
People sometimes mistakenly credit the water in New York for why the pizza's better there.
Or the bagels, too.
Yeah, and for the bagels. And some of that might be true in like how pure the water is, if it's very well filtered.
Yeah.
Because chlorine also kills bacteria.
Yeah, yeah.
And that in that sense it could be true, but people will like fly in water from Italy for their pizzas, which I just find a joke. It's a joke. That's it. The absence of chlorine can affect the dough.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's not water from a certain place, and you can get that from any kind of a purification standpoint. It's the techniques that area is generally doing, and
Okay.
also the environment that it's in. You're eating a slice in New York in the Big Apple on vacation with your boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, friend, drinking a beer. Like, that's pretty damn good.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You come back, you're like, oh, it must be the water. And you're like, well, it's a little more complicated than
Yeah.
that. Like, think about what you were doing, where you were, the people that made it, the history behind it. And yeah, they have access to some ingredients, but you're oversimplifying it. All that to say, yeah, water has its part. The amount and the temperature of the water those are the biggest factors in
Okay.
how water affects a dough. If it is a heavily chlorinated water, yeah, it's gonna kill all those good microorganisms
Okay.
in your dough, or it's gonna hinder them. But the city water in Knoxville isn't the best water. When you smell it, you can kind of smell the chlorine dissipating from it. And when we started opening, we used to put water in big Cambros and let it just dissipate overnight, so that chlorine would go out of it.
Okay.
And then eventually we just gave up on that because didn't really make sense in our process. And what I think happened is, as a result of using the water day in and day out, our sourdough starter, started to acclimate to that water, and our yeasts and the bacteria in it became really resilient and, sort of in spite of the chlorine, found a way to live. And
Wow.
that's
Okay.
sort of evolution and microbiology at its coolest, where
Yeah.
only the strong will survive. Like, these guys these bugs are really working hard to stay alive.
If I could do a Jeff Goldblum impersonation, I'll go, life finds a way. That's my best Jeff Goldblum.
And then we can all do his laugh that got
Yeah.
parodied.
And do the emotions. Yeah. Sorry.
That's
Yeah.
good. Yeah,
That is wild.
He's a
that
national treasure.
Yeah. That it found. He has a show on Disney Plus.
Okay. All
That
right.
is
Admit.
this.
Sold. By 2 years, get the third free.
Yeah. That is fascinating that it found a way to adapt to that water strain.
Yeah, and your sourdough starter is going to adapt to the environment no matter
Okay.
what. You can buy a starter. There's an island off of Italy called Ischia. There's a famous biga starter that was developed there, and it's called the Ischia culture, the Ischia biga, and you can buy it online and they can ship it to you.
Okay.
And really, that's more story than anything else, because after a few weeks, your starter is going to become whatever it's going to become anyways, based on the flour and the water and the ambient environment. So, yeah, a sourdough culture is very adaptive. Now, I'm actually getting our water tested next week, and I'm considering putting in purification, maybe spending a lot of money on that. And that's just another length that I'm willing to go to try to continue to perfect this product, because if we might, our culture, our sourdough starter starts to smell differently every now and then, and we all pay attention to the smell and the look of it. And if it's starting to smell a little different, it could be because of the water lines.
Okay.
So the more you can control, the better. So temperature,
Yeah.
controlling water temperature, controlling ambient temperature. Those are things we've really controlled those variables with different types of equipment, but purification we haven't got there yet.
Yeah.
So that's our next step. So yeah, water is important.
All right.
Do you drink tap water or do you drink filtered water?
I drink tap water here,
Yeah.
but when I travel, used to when I would drive, I would actually bring Knoxville tap water with me. We went to like Memphis or Savannah. Memphis and Savannah.
Memphis has good water. Anybody that's from Memphis talks about their artesian well water. Don't shake your head. Memphis is that the
Maybe it was
Memphis
the
has
shitty
great
hotel
water.
I was staying at that tap water was a little suspect. That's a.
You know what I think this is? I think this is your palate adapting.
Oh yeah.
To Knoxville
totally.
water.
Oh totally.
Which is what happens. And
But now I just buy a gallon or something. Like when I was up in Detroit, I was like, I drink like 140 ounces of water a day. I have a little app that tells me. It's like,
of course you do.
same thing.
Yeah.
But it's good because it helps remind me throughout the day, drink water. Like every hour, it's like, hey, dummy, don't forget to drink water.
And on that cue, I'm going to drink some water.
Nice. And but no, I think it totally is that I have adapted to the taste of this water. But I can't. The Savannah water was heavy in sulfur. I remember that, where it almost smelled when you turned the tap on.
Yeah. That's gross.
Yeah, yeah. And I am hearing recently, we were talking about farming and stuff, that I didn't realize this, but New Orleans around there, those tributaries and stuff are having problems with pesticides used on
Runoff.
farms, the runoff, and it's all traveling down to. I was like, man, they're just screwed between the oil derricks out in the ocean and the wastewater. Like, it's just
Closing in on them.
yeah. That is a goal. Let's knock on wood. I have for early in the spring is to go to Austin and New Orleans because I've never been to either.
Ooh.
I've got a friend who lives in Austin that I can couch crash. Hopefully, Rich, if you're listening to this, please let me couch crash. And he has said before, if I ever need to come down. But I was like, on the way back, I want to go to New Orleans because I've never been there. I'll be so damn close. I can go down to, I think it's El Paso, and go up along the coastline to New Orleans.
You could also take an Amtrak.
Can you take an Amtrak?
Yeah, so it's the Sunset Limited train that I think starts somewhere in Florida, goes through New Orleans, goes through El Paso, and I don't know how far from Austin it stops at, but it goes all the way to Southern California. It's like a 3-day trip.
Okay.
It's not cheap.
All the way to California.
Yeah, and then the train in California, it gets off somewhere around Oakland, and then north of San Francisco, the train line that goes through California is called the Starlight Express. It goes all the way up to Canada, Vancouver.
I have heard about that one. My friend, do you know Todd Steed, the musician?
I know of Todd Steed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice, one of the nicest people in this town.
I hear his voice on the radio a lot.
Yeah. He was posting on Twitter or something, a train he was on. I think it was Missouri to Memphis. And it literally just had big giant windows, and you sat in a chair that could rotate and just watch I was like,
Yeah.
Todd, tell me where I can go. Like, I want to do that.
So the California, the Via Rail, which is their version of Amtrak, the Vancouver to Toronto rail line, they'll have Starlight cars or where there's a second floor to the train car.
Yeah.
And it's just a glass ceiling. And when we were up there in the train, I took like a 45-day trip after high school, saved up money, bought a ticket.
Yeah.
Unlimited use in North America. And we were gone for a month and a half. So we did all that trip. That's why I know about the names of these trains. But the Northern Lights went out one night.
Oh, my
so,
God.
you know, my buddies were up there watching this through the roof of the train.
One of my friends, their TV, they have an older Roku, and its screensaver is where someone has mounted a camera on a Russian train. And so all it does is, and you're seeing not a repeating loop, you're literally seeing one
Continuous feed.
14-day trip that if you let it go, I think it switches out every hour or something. But it's amazing because there's been times where we've just been sitting around talking, and I'll just sit there and watch that thing and watch it go from like green to overcast to snow. I was like, this is so calming. I bet I can find it on YouTube. I was like, I could watch this.
Well, Netflix has something like that now.
Oh, do they?
You can fall asleep to. I think it's like the same thing. It's a long train ride.
Yeah. There's, here I will end on this. Funniest thing, we talk about Office. Are you a Parks and Rec fan?
I have watched it and really liked it.
So Nick Offerman is my spirit animal. Him and Ron Swanson. He is a big Lagavulin fan. I think it was Lagavulin.
Yeah.
Where they did the Christmas things.
Yeah.
And the New Year's thing.
Leslie Knope sends him there on a scavenger hunt. He goes to the actual distillery.
No, you can go on YouTube. It's him sitting next to a fire with a glass of Lagavulin for like 45 minutes.
Yeah, I watched a few minutes of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had it going in on like an iPad next to me at work one day.
I mean, this is the golden age of entertainment.
Yeah. And then he did another one that was New Year's where he was actually at Lagavulin, and you saw like, and he's still just standing there like this, and you saw, and it only went on for like 18 minutes. I was like, I love this so much. The fact that
it just makes you peaceful.
Because it's also the person who knows how to make a film or something. I was like, that took nothing. That took him literally sitting there still. That's one take. That's an hour of everyone's time.
He probably made like $25,000 doing it too.
Or probably got how many cases of Lagavulin, which is even better. All right. Thank you for doing this.
That's it.
That's it.
Whoa.
That's how we dismount.
How are we going to send these people off? What did we... We didn't really talk in a loop. We just kind of went we rambled. This is the rambling
This
man.
is the ramble man. I'm trying to think. The longest one I've ever done, I think, is 5 or 6 hours.
Oh, man.
But that guy, it's a guy who, my buddy Shane Ryan, who within, I think it's 24 hours, found out his wife was cheating on him, and got fired from his job. And now he is a regionally touring comedian. But he also, at age 18, straight out of high school, do you know Alex Haley?
Yeah.
Alex Haley had a figurine collection, and Shane wrote the bios and all the stories for all the figurines at 18. So he had bukus of stories. And he's a very nice guy and a very smart guy and a very eloquent guy. So
It sounds like that guy went through the ringer.
yeah. And he's made out. He's happy. He's met a woman that is
Not cheating on
amazing.
him.
She's amazing. Yeah. Tamara, she's awesome. And it's awesome seeing them in love. So that's how we'll end.
That's lovely. What a good ending.